Now let's do 11 by 17. So I'm going to go to here, create new. And under print, we're going to go tabloid. And under units here, we're going to choose inches and landscape. And we're only going to have, let's say, one page for now. So I don't need this thing here called facing pages just yet. I'll turn that off. And I know I can change these areas here, margins and bleed. I can change those areas elsewhere. So I'm not going to even bother with those either. I'm just going to hit create. Okay. So okay. All right. So as we talked about last week, when it comes to incorporating images into an InDesign page layout, it's typically done using these placeholders here, but not necessarily. So placeholders are here, that rectangle frame tool, and they allow you to create an area, for example, this big, that you can use for a picture. Now, once you create the area and you go over here to properties on the right, you see here it gives you information about where that object is located. Now, presently, this rectangle is 4.42 inches wide, 3.1 inches tall, and you can make these pretty exact. For example, I can simply come into here and type 4, enter, and here type 3, enter, and that's exactly 4 by 3, similar to what you draw in AutoCAD. And you can place it exactly where you like on the screen as well. And for example, here it says that the upper here has a little dot in the upper left-hand corner. It says that it's X and Y, X being left and right, Y being up and down. X and Y is 1.3 or 1.08, but I can make those exact. I can, for example, just highlight the entire thing and type 1. And here type 1. And it moves it exactly to 1 inch and 1 inch here for that box that is currently 4 by 3. Now, if I want to, I can go into File and Place and find pictures to place on the screen. What we talked about last class was, the fact that the picture that you brought in might accidentally or intentionally be scaled up, and that means that if the picture gets bigger, it's going to get worse and worse. But how much worse? There's a way to find that out in InDesign. So let's say I grab this picture here and uncheck that box. And let's say I drag it onto the screen. For example, well, not drag it, but I highlight it here and I simply hit open. And there's the picture. And if I place it inside of this box, it becomes part of the box. It becomes like a picture frame. The picture frame is the box, and your picture is inside the picture frame. So there's two things going on here. There's the box, like the picture frame, and then there's the image inside, and you can select either one. And when I dropped it off, I just clicked once, and it dropped it on the screen, and it made it the original size of that image from, for example, a program like Photoshop. Now, if I go back and I place it a second time, and this time I place it on the screen here, just clicking it once, again, the same rules apply, except that rather than using my existing frame, it just made a brand new frame. And it places the image inside that frame there. And it's a little bit tighter. Now, if I did it a third time, I'm going to pick that picture, hit open. I can click and hold my mouse down and drag it out, and you're going to get a different result. Now, it turns out that the resolution for these two are exactly the same. And the resolution for this one has gotten slightly worse. And remember, the resolution is dots per inch, or pixels per inch. It controls the quality of the image. The more dots you have for every inch of the picture, the better the picture looks. And so by making the picture bigger, you have less dots to work with for every inch of the picture. And so the resolution is getting worse and worse and worse the bigger you make the picture. Now, how much worse, we'll figure that out in a second. So we'll deal with the resolution today, and we'll deal with what's happening with these two images as well. So let me delete this one first. And so let's go back to the basics. And the basics as regard to these placeholders is if you click on the black arrow, that's a selection tool. Now let's select the box. The box, again, is like a picture frame. The picture frame could be bigger. The picture frame could be smaller. And it hides whatever part of the picture doesn't fit within the picture frame. Like a crop. Like an XClip in AutoCAD. And so when you select the outer border, that's what it's doing. I'm just simply grabbing these grips and making them bigger and smaller. But I can also hold Shift and make them bigger and smaller as well. And it does it proportionally, because if I don't hold Shift, I move these corners here, and you see that the size becomes arbitrary. Now you can always track the size over here. Like if this became out of whack, you can come in here and fix these numbers and properties and get it to be the right size again. But if you wanted the box to grow and get bigger proportionally, you can just hold down Shift while you grow the box. No, not the picture inside though, just the box. Now the picture inside would be you selecting the second tool, the direct select tool, that lets you select the picture, and you see the picture turns this kind of dark orange color. And again here, you can also grab these corners, but they will adjust the picture and squeeze the picture or make the picture bigger. And the format might not be completely right because of the fact that obviously if I squish the picture here horizontally, that doesn't look like the original picture any longer. If you hold down this button here, there's a grip here, the same thing happens. So if you want the pictures to grow and shrink proportionally, then you hold down Shift again. But you do it with the second tool here, the direct select tool, not the first one, because I'm inside the picture doing this work. Now, another thing that happens here is that typically when a picture has been brought into InDesign, it fools you into thinking that the picture looks terrible. Now, if I take a look at this picture, you see it looks really awful. This is what happens to a picture when the resolution is really, really low. It looks like this. You can see the pixels, these big blocks of color here, and it just looks awful. Now, what's happening here is actually a way of allowing you to work in InDesign much quicker. What it does is it typically makes these pictures look worse to speed up the computer, to speed up the work you're doing in InDesign. Especially, I mean, this is just one picture, but if you can have 20 pictures and 30 pictures, and all these pictures can become rather large. So to make things go faster, they reduce the resolution. So if I click on this picture and I right-click, go to Design Performance, you can see there's 3 different methods to show the picture in InDesign. Method number 1 is the fast design, which just simply shows you a box with an X through it. That's the fastest way you'll be able to work on your computer. If your computer is running slow, really, really slow, and you already know that there's a certain picture in the box, you can transform it into this fast display. No problem. Typical display is the one we just saw earlier. So typical display is it shows a low quality version, you see here. And then the last one is high quality display. And that'll show you the best quality for that image. And you can see it looks a lot better. And so I can't tell you what to use in your computers because everyone's computer has different resources. You know, some have faster processors, some do not. So all I can say is if your computer begins to run really slow when you're using lots and lots of images and lots of graphics, then I suggest you go to design performance and you knock it down. Obviously, high performance is the slowest. Typical performance is next, fastest. And the fastest way is the fast display on the list there. And it'll make things go a little bit faster. Now, let's talk about these boxes a second time. Let me delete that box. You can also bring in pictures into multiple frames. So I'm just I just drew a box here, and then I'll, with the same selection here, the rectangle frame tool, I'll do another one here, another one here. And Revit, or not Revit, rather, InDesign gives you some tricks where if you're approximately the same size as something else, it'll show you these little hints. For example, the third box is the same length as the first box because these little hints tell me that the green line here that matches. The height of all of these three are the same because there's a green vertical line that goes across these boxes that say that they match up. And those kind of nice to have. So if you want an image to be placed in Revit, I keep saying Revit, InDesign, and you want to go across these boxes here, you select all the boxes together. And again, you can do that by just holding your mouse and going backwards, holding your mouse button down, go backwards. They're all selected, and then you go to Objects. Where's Path? Objects. Paths, and then make a compound path. And that what that does is it tells InDesign that these boxes are all linked together. Now we know those boxes can hold pictures, so when I make a compound path, it treats these boxes as one big box. But there's gaps in between them. These gaps here, and those gaps will continue to become gaps. So if I did this, for example, and I placed an image in here, take this big image here, and I dropped it on, hit open, and I dropped it inside any one of these boxes, then it'll fill the screen. And it's one picture across all three. So if I choose this little circle here, if you're in the first selection here, it gives you the circle. If you're in the second, it knows you're going to select the picture. This the white rectangle there. It knows you're already selecting the picture. So you can see here, the picture gets selected and moved in all three. And so you can also do that. So that means that I can come back in here and I can edit one of these boxes, and you see it because they were combined together into one shape. This is going to try to maintain the relationship proportionally between these gaps here. You know, if I go backwards here, proportionally they'd be that big. This one's a little bit bigger than that one. And I can make it bigger, for example. So on and so forth. And then I can also go back to Object, Paths, and then release the compound path. And then what happens is they're no longer grouped together. And you have one box that retains the photo. This one here. And moving that little circle again, because I'm in the first selection tool here, move that picture. Okay, so that can be a cool effect that you're using for a design, and you can use that if you like. Now, let me delete these. Now, there's different ways to resize the picture inside the box here. Now, one way would be to grab the corner of the picture, but it's off the screen somewhere. You know, this picture is pretty big. And even if I selected this arrow here, it's hard to tell where the edges of the image is on this picture. You know, I'm using the, if I use this tool here, the second tool, that only grabs pictures, and I grab this picture, and I zoom out with the magnifying glass. To zoom out, you hold Alt, and you get a little minus sign, or you hold Shift to the plus sign. So plus makes you zoom in, and then Alt, if you hold Alt down on the keyboard, it makes you zoom out with the zoom tool. And so there you can see the original size of the picture. So this is how much of the picture is visible in that window. And so here, I could grab the second tool here and hold Shift and proportionally shrink the picture so it doesn't get distorted. And I can make it fit, you know, inside that box there. So on and so forth. Okay. But there's quicker ways to get the pictures to get inside those boxes, which we'll go over in a second. In terms of resizing the picture, you know, I mentioned that you could select it here, and you can also, let me go back. You can also Control, Shift, select and drag, and the picture there will be shrunk proportionally. So for example, if I adjust it here, and then I grab the little grip here, and I hold down Shift and Control while grabbing a grip. I don't know yet, again, we haven't covered it yet, how the proportions are working and how that affects the resolution. But I'm just showing you how to manipulate the pictures inside the boxes. And you can also replace the pictures. You can basically have a picture selected here, go to File, Place, and with this picture selected, choose a different picture, like for example this picture. Actually, that's not what I want to do. Let me delete that. This here. Yeah. So if I have a picture that I want to replace, like I decided that, well, I don't want this picture in this location on my layout, on my design. So I can select the box, the picture frame basically, and then I can go to File, Place, and then here at the bottom it has these buttons here, and this is where I'm going to use this one here, Replace Selected Item. The selected item is currently this frame that's being selected here. I choose the picture and hit OK, and it replaces the picture. So you can also replace the picture. So you don't have to, you know, be worried about the fact that you're stuck with that picture. You can always replace it. Now, what about the fact that these pictures can be manipulated and change shapes like this, for example, and be resize incorrectly, disproportionately? Well, you got two choices here. Because this picture is supposed to look like this. Let me show you. If I place this picture, this is the original shape of the picture, original size of the picture here. And in this image here, it got distorted. It should look like this, it should be about this size. So there's two ways to fix this problem. When you've got an image inside of a frame that's incorrectly scaled, you accidentally clicked on this and grabbed these grips and didn't hold down shift, for example, and you had it squished, or you did something wrong, or you made it too big. So what you can do is you can click on the picture and then right click, and under, where did it go? Fitting, you can choose one of these two. You can fill the frame proportionally. Now the frame is the box that you're in. This is the frame that we built, the blue one. So you can fill the frame proportionally, which is this one here. And it decides on whether the height or the width of the picture, when it starts growing, maxes out. And in this case, it maxed out at the grab this over here. This picture, you see the picture here in orange, it's actually bigger. But when it started growing, it hit the max width or height. And so it grew to the size of the frame, and it maxed out at the width, and it left the top and bottom off the page. No, there's more. You see, there's more right there. Now, is this going to be the right or wrong size, though? If I do this, if I go right-click, I fit the picture and fill the frame. Now the frame decides how big the picture is. This blue frame, the frame decides how big the picture is. You think the picture is right or wrong in terms of its resolution? Can y'all still hear me? Well, currently it's wrong because the picture grew to be the size of the frame. Again, the size of the frame. The size of the frame could be this big, the size of the frame could be that big, the size of the frame could be this big. The picture grew to fit inside the frame. But the frame has nothing to do with the quality of the image. It just makes it grow and expand until it reaches either the height or the width, whichever one comes first. So I can place this image inside each of these. This one. This one. Let me select it first. Or this one. But when you select it, like I just did, it places the image at the original size of the art, which is, if I just place it on the right here, you can see how big it is. This is the normal size of how big the picture is. You notice that this picture is exactly that size there, and that size there. So if you went in here and you clicked on the picture and then you try to fit it in proportionally, it's gonna grow the picture to make it fit within this rectangle here. Whether that means it gets taller, or, well, it'll always get taller and longer, but it'll max out. If I grab this picture here, fitting proportionally, then here it maxed out at the length. this one here, if I fit it in proportionally, you see, it tries to fit the entire picture in here. But you see, I've got 3 different sizes of pictures because it's controlled by the frame. So that's not what you want. If you wanted the picture, you know, that's going to make the picture the right size. It's not going to make the picture squished or anything. It's going to grow it or shrink it to fit within the box. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the right size. For example, here, there's the picture. And fit proportionally means that it just grows and grows until it either reaches the overall width of the box. But I made the picture bigger than the original here, so this is the wrong size. It's the right proportion, but it's the wrong size. If you want to fix it to be the right size as far as the original is concerned, you have to right-click on here and fit the content proportionally. Fit the content, which is the picture, not the frame, the picture proportionally. Fit the content proportionally. And so there's different ways to do that. There's different methods to make your picture fit. But again, you have to check to see if you run the risk of making the picture too big based on its original. All right, so those are the 2. I mean, I know they can be confusing. It takes a little practice to get used to those tools, but let me move on and show you something else you can do. You can also place more than one image at the same time. So for example, on this one, this one, this one, and this one, and I got them all highlighted right here. I got more than one picture highlighted because I held down the control on my keyboard. I got 4 pictures, and I hit open. Then you'll see on my mouse here, there's a number 4 next to the little symbol there on the image. And when I place these, they get placed in the order that they were captured. So image 1, image 2, image 3, image 4. And so you can very quickly drop those onto the screen. Now, if you have an idea of what order they're supposed to be in, you know, if I go back and go edit place and hit open, and then here what I could do is use the left and right keys on my keyboard and decide, well, that's not the first one, that's going to be the second one. So use your mouse on your your arrows on your keyboard. You can pick which one's going to be first, second, and third. I'm just using my left and right arrows on my keyboard. So let's say I want this one first. Click, and then cycle through. I want this one second. Click, cycle through. Only got 2 left. This one third. Click. This one fourth. Click. And then you got your pictures on the screen. If you do that again, and again, you got more than one picture here, you can also resize the pictures, but again, you got to be careful when you do this because it might change the size of the picture to be inappropriate based on the original resolution. And you can place them on the screen, you know, like so. You can click and drag them out. If you know the picture is really huge, making it smaller will always make it look better. you can click and drag it out, and the pictures come out at whatever the final size is that you unselected when you drag them out. You can also bring in Photoshop pictures. When you do that, you open, and the only difference here is that when you go File, Place, I don't know if I have let's see, Photoshop. Well, here's a Photoshop file, for example. If I did this with a Photoshop file, here it says Show Import Options, right here. If I had that checked, what it does is it lets me have options of how that picture is going to come in from Photoshop, because we know in Photoshop has layers. And so when you bring a project in from Photoshop, it's actually smart enough to know what the layers are and let you decide which ones you want to bring in and not bring in, which ones are going to be on and off, basically. So if I brought this in, for example, you'll get this, for example, here. And turning off these are the layers in the Photoshop file. And you can decide which layers to show, for example, and which ones not to show, because right now they're all going to come in. But if you only wanted one to come in, you don't have to make a separate file for that. You simply just hide what you don't want to see. And that one object comes in by itself. And that's a Photoshop file. So now when I click on here, that's a Photoshop file. And that's another thing that InDesign lets you do. Bring in Photoshop files. But let me go back and show you 1, 2, 3, 4. Actually, I don't want that. This is the images coming in with that link, which I don't want now. I don't want this turned on. Show import options. I don't want to show import options. I just want to bring in the pictures. So let's bring in these 3 pictures again. This one I'll click and drag. And this one I will click and make it tiny. Okay. So there's no way of knowing at first glance which one of these pictures, what resolution they're gonna print at, because I know I've mentioned that the dimensions matter. So how do we know that this is not the right size? How to know that it's correct? So when you go to Window and you look at links, here's links. This menu tells me exactly the quality of all my images. These are the file names of these images here. And if I go through these file images, I can predict which ones are going to look correct when they print and which ones are going to look awful. And again, what is the range of resolution of DPI that we want for pictures to make them look good when they print? Because we were discussing in a previous class, anything between 72 and 300. Well, what range will be decent? Go ahead and give me an answer. You all still connected?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So yeah, what 72 dots per inch up to 300. I mentioned in that range there was a minimum that you need to have a decent looking printout. What is that minimum? And everyone take a guess. Everyone else? Okay, so we got some answers. So typically, 300 is the max. Now, if you go over 300, that's, I mean, anything over 300 just looks that much better. And so 300 is the ceiling. But if it's 400 or 500 dots per inch or 700 dots per inch, that only means that the picture looks that much better. But it's going to be really hard for you to determine, you know, the difference between a 300 dots per inch picture and a 500 dots per inch picture. You know, 300 is really, really, really good. But the minimum should be around 200. And so if we go through these pictures here, some are smaller, some are bigger, we can take a look at what the resolution is in InDesign. Click on this one. Take a look. Actual PPI is points per inch, and effective PPI is the actual is the actual file itself, and the effective is in InDesign, right? Because the file came from Photoshop or something. It has a certain quality in Photoshop. It came in a certain size. Then in InDesign, you either made that picture the same size, smaller, or bigger. Something happened to it. Well, this one here, it says that the effective points per inch or dots per inch, they're the same, they mean the same thing, is 300 dots per inch. And so this picture here is going to print out really, really nicely because it's 300. The effective in InDesign, this is going to print out 300 dots per inch. And that's going to look great. What about this one? Look what happened here. This picture came in at 300 dots per inch, and it effectively is 144 dots per inch in InDesign. That means that this picture has gotten worse. It used to be 300 in Photoshop. It became 144 in InDesign. This has gotten worse because it was made too big. And so if you're below 200, you're effectively making your image look worse and worse and worse. So this picture was scaled poorly. The picture should have been, here, I'll do an example. It should have been, if I just click on the screen, it'll be at the normal size. There. 300 dots per inch. And it prints out at 300 dots per inch. It came in from Photoshop, points per inch, or DPI at 300. And in InDesign, is it going to print out at the same dots per inch or points per inch, 300. It hasn't shrunk, it hasn't gotten bigger. It's the exact same size. This picture gotten bigger, it looks twice as bad because it got twice as big. Does that make sense? And so always look at actual PPI. Okay, that means if you open the file in Photoshop, what will Photoshop tell you about the file size, the quality of the file? And then the second one is, well, when you bring it to InDesign and you try to print it, what will happen to that picture? Will it get worse or will it get better? And here, it's gotten worse. Now, what about this one? This one's tiny. Okay, how about this one? Has this one gotten better or worse? And let's hear from everybody in class. This last little picture here, has it gotten better or worse based on these numbers? Worse? Again, the actual points per inch or DPI is 240. And then the effective, what happened when it went into InDesign and it's about to print out, it jumped up to 700. It's gotten way better. It's even over 300. It's gotten way better. It's at 700 dots per inch. And so it began life as a 240 pixels per inch file in Photoshop. It became 700. It's gotten better because the picture shrunk. This picture is tiny. The original size of the picture, if I go in here, whoops, if I place it, this one, don't replace, and I place it right here. That's how big it's supposed to be. Look at it here. It says that the picture was made at 240 dots per inch, which is still above 200, which still looks pretty good. And by the way, it's going to print at the same quality, 240 points per inch or dots per inch or resolution. It's all the same. All those words mean the same thing. And so there's only two ways this can go. Well, three ways. It can be made worse, it can be made better, or it can stay the same as Photoshop. And this is staying exactly the same. So if you've got a bad looking picture here and you wanted to improve it, you need to make it smaller. You need to shrink it. And the smaller it gets, the better it'll look. I'm going to grab the picture. I'm going to hold Shift and make the picture smaller. Actually, I can do it with the frame too. I believe I can do it with the frame. I have to hold, let's see, is it Control? It's Shift. No, not that one. It's this one, and I believe it's Shift and Control at the same time. We'll make the frame smaller and shrink the picture. Because normally, when you shrink the picture, you have to hold this button here. It turns orange. You hold Shift and the picture gets smaller. Or you use the first button here. You click on the blue frame, but the frame, even when you hold Shift, the frame gets smaller proportionally, but it doesn't make the picture smaller. Now, if we want to make the picture smaller and the frame smaller at the same time, that's when you hold not only Shift, but also Control. And there, they're both shrinking. And notice what's happening. As the picture gets smaller, the resolution goes up here. So it went from 240 to 353 because this picture has gotten smaller and smaller. It's shrinking. The smaller the picture, the better the quality. Now it's over 400 dots per inch. You can ignore anything over 300 because at 300, you got it as good as you're going to get. So it's really important because if you bring in the pictures into InDesign and you anticipate it to look a certain way when it prints out, it's gonna go terribly wrong if you don't look at these numbers because you made them inappropriately sized, and you're the only judge of how big your pictures are. Okay, so let me take this a step further. This picture here, open, place it right there. Click on it. It says it's 300 dots per inch, and it's going to print in InDesign at 300 dots per inch. And if I open another picture in Photoshop, excuse me, the open with Photoshop. Let's take a look. And the sooner you understand this, the better off you'll be, because this is where you can make or break a project. You can make it look terrible, or you can make a project look great by just simply looking at these numbers. if you go here to image size, it says here, this picture is 1254 by 836 pixels. That's 4 inches times 300 dots per inch, resolution, points per inch, PPI, or DPI, whatever you want to call it, or quality. This times this is 1254. This times this is 836. This is all you have when you make an image. And these are linked together, so that checkbox is turned off. So if you take a picture that's 4 inches wide and you make it 2 inches wide, the math has to work. This number never changes. 2 times 600 suddenly is still 1254. And 1.3 times 6 is, so I made the picture smaller and the resolution jumped up. And that's what I'm talking about. So if you want to control this, you have to understand these numbers. So if I decided that I want this picture to be at 200 dots per inch, there. Well, this number doesn't change. These numbers change based on this. So now 6 by 4 at 200 dots per inch. I made the picture bigger. Now, let's say I accept that. And then I go File, Save As. And I call this my 200 DPI version. So this picture is now, take a look, 6 by 4 at 200 dots per inch. The dimensions always stay the same. This gets bigger. Because I made this bigger, the resolution got lower. Because do the math to get to that number. What has to happen? And so now in InDesign, if I come into here and I go File, Place, and I look for this 200 dots per inch version, this one here, and I click on the screen, look what happened. It remembers the actual points per inch, or DPI, in Photoshop. This number, these three together, that says 200. So InDesign says, okay, it's going to be 200. And the effective PPI, or when InDesign prints it out, it'll be exactly 200. It hasn't shrunk, it hasn't gotten bigger. It's exactly the same size that came out of Photoshop. So now you have a choice. Do you want this picture to look better, the same, or worse? You typically don't want to make it worse, so don't make the picture bigger, because if you make it bigger, you're going to go under 200 dots per inch. So if I grab this picture holding Shift, Control, and I made this picture bigger, it gets worse. 154 dots per inch, which is exactly the same thing Photoshop is doing. If I came in here and made this number bigger, do the math. If this number gets bigger, this becomes 8. What does this have to become to get to 1254? It has to be 150. So if I make it 8 inches wide, I made it bigger, but at the cost of the resolution. The quality of the image just went down. If I decide to make this 150, then that's 8.36. 8.36 times 150 equals 1254, and then that times that equals that number there. These numbers never change. And so that's why you have to worry about this stuff. That's why you don't want to make your picture bigger. So you can go through this link whenever you like under Windows Links here and just test to make sure that you aren't accidentally or intentionally making your pictures look worse. And you want to make them at least 200 dots per inch. Because if you make them worse and worse, they're gonna look terrible when you print. The bigger this file gets, the worse and worse it's becoming. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. Does that make a little more sense now? And just trust the fact that, here it says dimensions, you see, 1254 by 836. Whether it's this picture here, 1254 by 836, whether it's this picture here, 1254 by 836, it never changes. That's as good a quality you're going to get. That's the overall size of the picture. What changes is the dimensions times the resolution. And so that's why, if those stay the same, the other numbers have to change. And you always have to be on the lookout for that. Okay? So if I wanted to make a really terrible picture, image size, if I want to make this picture much, much bigger, I would have to lower the resolution. If I said 72, okay, well, it's 17 inches it's 17 by 11 now, but it's at 72 dots per inch. That's going to be a huge picture in InDesign. And the only way to make it better looking in InDesign is to shrink it until the resolution is bigger than 72. So here, you got to be careful. If I save it like this, you never lose this. The dimensions always stay the same. The file size, the dimensions in pixels always stays the same. But whatever I save here, these numbers will get reflected in InDesign. So if you want to come out of Photoshop with 300 dots per inch picture, make sure it says 300 dots per inch, or have the intention of making it smaller. But I don't have to do this work in Photoshop. I can leave it like this. Okay, here. I can say this is going to be 72 dots per inch. I go File, Save As. This is going to be terrible, but it's going to be a 72 dots per inch picture. And there, I saved it with my image size reflecting this change. So this is exactly how big it'll be in InDesign. 17 by 11 at 72 dots per inch. So let's delete these. Let's go File, Place. It should be as big as the entire screen. This one here. Click on the screen. Actually, it maxed out at 144. What you see here, it maxed out at 144 instead of 72 dots per inch. So if I begin to shrink this picture, I'm holding down Shift and Control at the same time. Sorry. As I make the picture bigger, smaller, it gets better and better. You see, at 200 now. So what that shrinking I just did, you have a choice. You can either do that shrinking in Photoshop, or you can do it in InDesign. Doesn't matter where you do it. I just did it here in InDesign because I didn't want to go back to Photoshop. It's up to you. Okay. And so that's my lecture on resolution. So here's my class notes. So the size and the quality of images in InDesign will depend on how big you intended it to be. 5 by 7 at 200 dots per inch is 5 times 200 and 7 times 200, and that'll be the pixel size. And the image links, the Windows links will tell you what is happening to the image. If the image gets bigger, it looks worse. If the image gets smaller, it looks better and better and better. And there's a technique here called Object Transform Scale that lets you, that's the shortcut I was using, but here, object, transform, scale, here. If I make it, let's see where it's at right now. It's at 208. And so if I make it twice the size, 6% smaller, it becomes double the quality. See? Instead of 208, now it's at 416. So double the quality, half the size. And you can do it, you don't have to do it by holding Shift and Control and remember these keyboards. You can always just do it here, edit, transform, scale, and do it here. That means that it's going to link it proportionally. So the changing the length is going to change the height at the same time. You want to make sure that's locked. And then you 100%. Well, it doesn't make it any bigger or smaller, actually. You need to make it 200%, twice as big, 300%, 3 times as big, or some number smaller than 100%. Okay. So let's have our first break. And then we'll talk about other techniques in InDesign now that you kind of have an idea how to deal with pictures. Pictures are hugely important. That's why I want to focus so much time on pictures. Hugely important. But let me take a break here, and we'll get back to additional InDesign commands